You're listening to The Alien Observer. I'm David McElroy. In the past few days, parts of this country have started burning and falling apart all around me. It started in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd by a police officer, and it's been spreading quickly. Bigger cities have been burning for a couple of days now. It even threatens to break out here in Birmingham. There were peaceful protests this weekend, and some not-so-peaceful protests are threatened for tonight. The Apple store near my house was boarded up this afternoon to protect it from looters. And it's in one of the safest, most upscale locations you can imagine. As I have watched the looting and violence and listened to angry people argue on social media, I found myself thinking at times, I pretty much hate everyone right now. I don't like feeling that way, and I'm not entirely sure where all of the anger is coming from. But I desperately need to disconnect from the insanity around me and connect with someone who is saner and more loving. This broad societal insanity is doing really bad things to my mind. I suspect there is a lot of undirected anger in our society right now, in lots of people of all different beliefs. Because most people have felt essentially powerless for months now. There was nothing we could do about a viral infection which was spreading, and we had no choice but to obey politicians and bureaucrats who wanted most people to remain trapped in their own homes for safety. That has left people on edge and ready to strike out at one another. People are acting emotionally, and quite a number of them are acting crazy. I was once naive enough to believe that humans were rational. I know better now. As someone who has had strong faith in reason throughout his life, it's painful to me to be in a position in which reason is powerless to make people see that the truth is more complex than what they're being told. It's deeply hurtful to realize that reason and facts have been discarded in exchange for standards of subjective feelings. Postmodernism, the ideas involved with postmodernism, which are the ideas that succeeded modernism, and modernism is what took the place of the Enlightenment. Postmodernism has destroyed the values of the Enlightenment, and it is slowly destroying what remains of Western culture. And because people are so poorly educated, they don't even recognize what's going on. I've told you before that I realized about 25 years ago that this country was on a path that would lead to its collapse. It's going to fall apart, socially, politically, and economically. When I first saw that, it seemed far-fetched to most people. Even today, most people accept on faith that something will save us, just as it always has. But I think we're seeing a foretaste of a violent and scary future right now. I don't think this country is going to fall apart next week, or this week, or the week after next month. It could happen, but that's unlikely. This is just another one of those shocking periods that shows the rot that lies underneath. On the surface, we normally act as though we all get along pretty well. But just underneath the surface, there are tensions and divisions and anger that's all waiting to come out into the open. Over the last few days, you have seen how nasty and violent those things can get when they erupt. I assume that these riots will end in another week or so, maybe longer. I assume we're not going to see more of our cities burn in major ways. I assume that we won't see angry mobs moving out to the wealthy suburbs to attack and loot the homes there. Not yet. But that day is coming. It's going to come when there's an economic crash, and then there's some other incident, maybe racial, such as the one this week. It doesn't take much to ignite the anger and hatred that are waiting to come out. And when one side starts looting and killing, the other side will eventually start killing in return. Each will blame the other. There will be all sorts of ways in which it could play out, including the possibility of a full-blown race war. Given the fact that white people will be in the minority in this country in the next decade or so, it would be more and more realistic as groups which have been minorities for decades or centuries take power, as they take more and more power, and angry groups of people collide, and all of these old tensions come out. The last week or so has conclusively proven every negative and hateful thing that almost every single person already believed about race and society, at least in his own mind. I see no realistic chance that any of this will find a solution that's based on peace and love. I see more of the same hate instead. Whoever can gain a majority, whoever can gain power one way or another, will violently impose their will on those who don't agree. And they will impose their will while using words of love and unity when all they really want is compliance. Voluntary cooperation and mutual respect for individual differences will be ignored, as usual. You might notice that I'm not talking about who's right and who's wrong in the current political and social clash. That's because it simply doesn't matter. I would be happy to give you a detailed explanation, a reasonable point-by-point summary about how we got to this point. But it wouldn't make either of the two warring sides happy with me. I'm leaving it alone because it has nothing to do with how we live our lives in the future, how we deal with this. If you were standing in front of a tornado, or a hurricane, or a tidal wave, you don't really care to argue with the disaster that's about to strike you. You don't tell the tornado that it has no right to hurt you. You don't tell the hurricane that it is required to obey the law and leave you alone. You don't hold up your hand to the tidal wave and say, "You are wrong to threaten me." No, you don't argue with nature. You get out of the way. You accept reality and run away from what could kill you and kill your family. You get away while you still can. And that is my warning here. If you believe that this crisis will be over and everything will be fixed and all will go back to normal, I'm warning you not to expect that. These aren't the first riots we've seen. You can go back to 1968 in various places. There were some in the 70s. Or you can look to the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992, or riots related to the shooting in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, which is far more recent. There have been others, but they're getting worse. My sense is that they're getting worse each time. I don't think we've seen something like what is developing over the past 5 or 6 days. And I think that it is hinting at something huge to come. Before a major earthquake hits, there are often a lot of small shocks ahead of time. The ground shakes in minor ways, hinting at the major shock that's still to come. Right now, we are experiencing another of those small shocks. There is still time to escape right now. But if you wait until the real earthquake starts, it will be too late. You'll probably lose everything. You might even lose your life. And you might even see the death of the people around you who you love. If you'll stick around after this quick break, I'll be back with more. When I launched my first podcast, I took a friend's recommendation about which hosting service to use. He told me that Anchor.fm was the only one that I ought to consider. And it turns out that he was right. I had such a great experience with the free Anchor service that I'm also using it for this second podcast too. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. And best of all, it's free. I don't know how they do it, but it's free. I record and edit my podcasts on my own MacBook, but Anchor even has tools to allow you to record straight into a web browser, or even your mobile phone if you're not ready for the challenge of doing your own recording. Anchor will handle all the distribution of your podcast too, getting it into all of the major podcast directories such as Apple, Google, and Spotify. They even have a plan by which you can run ads if you want, but you're not required to if you don't want to. Anchor has everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. When I am most frustrated with humans, I'm drawn to get as close to nature as possible. I think I like nature better than people in many respects, simply because nature is rational and dispassionate. A leaf doesn't pretend to be a bird. Photosynthesis works the same way every time the conditions are right. The cellular structure of a leaf doesn't randomly change from day to day and tell me that what I have clearly observed in the past didn't happen. Nature can be cruel. Nature can be destructive. But at least nature is honest and consistent within a large framework. Nature makes sense. We humans often don't make sense. I am scared about what humans have in store for this country. Left-wing social engineers who want to coercively reshape the world in accordance with postmodern cultural thought scare me just as badly as the ignorant right-wing rednecks and populists who glorify a different sort of anti-intellectual barbarism. I still stand for the liberty and the dignity of the individual, not of the group, not of a collective. The possibilities and the dreams of the Enlightenment are still the things I want to strive for. But I can't stop the dangerous collapse that is coming to this country. I can't stop history. You are standing in the path of a social disaster which will be part of history books not long from now. Those who remember any history have at least heard about the fall of Rome. This will be something like that. This will be the fall of the United States of America. An experiment that lasted, 250 years or whatever, and then collapsed just as every empire eventually does. You can either argue about what's right. You can argue that your side is right and that the other side is wrong, and be destroyed by the disaster which will swallow everybody. Or you can pay attention to what's going on and make plans to escape while you still can. The choice is yours right now. But what you do will determine what happens to you in the very near future. And it will determine what happens for your children. Most people will choose poorly. They'll trust politicians to take care of them. I hope that you are wise enough and smart enough to escape instead. The Alien Observer is written and produced by me, David McElroy. If you'd like to get in touch, send me an email at davidmcelroy@mac.com. That's davidmcelroy@mac.com. Or go to anchor.fm/thealienobserver to record a voice response. Anything you send might end up on a future episode. There's also a donation link on that page if you'd like to support the show. For more about me and what I've written in the past, including thousands of articles over the last 10 years, go to davidmcelroy.org. The Alien Observer is copyright 2020 by David McElroy. All rights are reserved on the planet Earth, but rights are still pending on the planets where the rest of the aliens live. Theme music is The Boy and the Kite by Solitude and is licensed courtesy of Soundstripe. The birds and crickets from the opening was recorded live in my own backyard. Please join me again next time for more observations about this strangely alien world that's all around us.